Hello! If you're visiting for the first time, it's fantastic to have you here. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. This video features mostly true scary stories with the sound of gentle rain in the background. If you're looking for something to help with sleeplessness, anxiety, or stress, you're in the right place. If you enjoy the stories, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. Thank you for being here. I have something special just for you. If you enjoy a good thrill, you're in the right place. Today, I want to share a story about a house that changes all by itself, and it might just give you the chills. As you listen, remember to subscribe and comment below, letting me know where you're joining from. And here's a little something to think about. Have you ever wanted to lose weight without lifting a finger? Well, I've got an amazing weight loss dietary supplement that works wonders even while you sleep. Click the link in the description below to learn more. Now, let's dive into the story. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over our new home as my partner and I pulled up in our van, filled with boxes and bags. I could hardly contain my excitement as I stepped out, taking in the beautiful house. It was a charming two-story structure with pale blue siding and white shutters, surrounded by vibrant flowers and tall trees that swayed gently in the breeze. Everything seemed perfect at first glance. However, as I walked up the steps onto the creaky porch, I felt a chill slither down my spine. The air was different here, thicker than I was used to. It was almost like the house was breathing, taking deep, slow breaths as if it were a living thing. A soft rustling came from the front bushes, but when I looked closer, I saw nothing there. Shaking off my unease, I turned to my partner, who smiled brightly, already dreaming of the memories we would make here. As we entered the house, the creaking floorboards announced our arrival. The inside was just as lovely as the outside. Sunlight filtered through the big windows, casting playful shadows on the brightly painted walls. I admired the space, imagining where we would place our furniture and how we would decorate each room with our personal touches. But underneath, all my excitement lingered that strange feeling. I brushed it aside, convincing myself it was just nerves about the new beginning. We spent the day unpacking, eager to get everything in its place. Every room was a blank slate, a canvas awaiting color and life. The kitchen had a large window that overlooked the backyard, a perfect spot for mornings filled with coffee and sunlight. The living room had a fireplace that beckoned cozy nights. I envisioned laughter and love, the kind of life you only see in movies. But as I placed the last box on the living room floor, I noticed something strange. A shadow danced in the corner of my eye, moving quickly along the wall. I turned my head abruptly, but there was nothing there. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was just my imagination. I looked back at my partner, who was focused on arranging books on the shelves. They seemed so at ease, completely absorbed in the moment. I couldn't bring myself to share my feeling of unease. I didn't want to rain on their parade. That night, after a long day of work and moving, we finally settled into bed, ready to rest. The moonlight streamed through the window, bathing the room in a soft glow. Despite my exhaustion, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. It felt as if the house whispered to me in the darkened corners hiding secrets I was too afraid to uncover. I listened closely, trying to catch the words, but there was only silence, heavy and thick like the air that enveloped the house. I turned to my partner, hoping to find comfort in their presence, but they were already asleep, their breathing soft and steady. I envied them for being able to drift off peacefully in this strange place. As I tried to relax, I heard the faintest sound, a creaking, almost like footfalls echoing through the halls. My heart raced, and I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to believe that it was just the house settling. Eventually, I found slumber creeping in, though it was restless and filled with odd dreams. In the morning, I awoke to the warm sunlight pouring through the curtains, feeling refreshed, but still a nagging sense of something being off hovered in the back of my mind. It was new, it was exciting, yet it felt just a little like danger lurking in the shadows. As the days unfolded, I tried to shake off that eerie feeling, throwing myself into making the house feel like home. But deep down, I sensed that the house was more than just wood and nails. It felt alive in its own way, and I was just beginning to uncover its unwelcoming secrets. At first, I thought settling into our new home would be smooth sailing. However, it began with little things that I could easily brush off as my imagination or forgetfulness. One sunny morning, I got up, ready to enjoy a nice breakfast. As I shuffled into the living room, I was taken aback. The couch that we had carefully positioned against the wall was now facing a different wall altogether, staring blankly at the window. I paused, brows furrowing in confusion. Was I going crazy? I could have sworn that just a day ago, the couch had been in its place. My heart raced as I glanced around the room, wondering if I had somehow moved it and forgotten in the midst of unpacking. I called out to my partner, who was busy in the kitchen. "Hey, did you move the couch?" My partner looked up, chuckling lightly. "No, you probably just forgot. I mean, we've been through a lot. You're bound to forget things right now." Their laughter sounded lighthearted, but I wasn't so sure. I shrugged it off and joined them in the kitchen, hoping that maybe I just hadn't paid enough attention. Still, a thought nagged at me as I poured myself a cup of coffee. The next day, I found the dining chairs arranged in a circle, facing away from the table, like they were having a secret meeting among themselves. My curiosity turned to discomfort. Why would anyone move them like that? I nervously laughed, glancing at my partner again, but they seemed genuinely oblivious, lost in their own world. As the week went on, this unsettling pattern continued. I'd find books misplaced, the remote control in odd locations, and even my favorite blanket had turned up in the bathroom. I could barely wrap my head around it. Each time I noticed something strange, I felt this anxious pressure building in my chest, desperate to find a logical explanation. It wasn't long before I decided to keep a mental note of everything. I even started marking a list on my phone, recording when and where I found something out of place. I felt like I was slipping further into a mystery that didn't make any sense. Am I losing my mind? I would whisper to myself at night, lying awake as shadows danced along the walls. Some nights, I would hear faint sounds that resembled laughter or whispers echoing through the empty hallways. When I would check, nothing would be there, just the eerie silence and darkness. I hesitated to tell my partner. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching me, quietly chuckling at my confusion. Then came one particularly unsettling night that changed everything. I woke up suddenly, driven from sleep by a noise that sounded like a door creaking open. Looking around in the darkness, my heart raced as the sound echoed through the emptiness of the house. I glanced at my partner, who was sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the chaos stirring around us. Feeling an impulse to investigate, I quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake them. As I tiptoed into the hallway, I felt the chill of the air wrapping around me, making my skin prick. The shadows loomed larger than normal, and I squinted into the darkness, trying to make sense of what was happening. But what I discovered was beyond anything I could have imagined. As I stumbled through the dark, I realized that what I thought was my bedroom was no longer there. In its place, I found the kitchen, a place I had visited so many times but was completely out of context. The countertops and refrigerator stood staring back at me, illuminated by the dim glow of the moon seeping through the window. I felt dizzy, my stomach twisted in confusion as I hesitated to step further into what should have been my sanctuary. The walls outside the kitchen pulsed rhythmically, almost alive, like they were breathing in sync with my rising panic. I blinked hard, trying to grasp the absurdity of the situation. This house was playing tricks on me. I glanced around and saw the clock on the wall. Its hands were spinning wildly, moving too fast for me to comprehend. When I looked back at the kitchen, I was hit with a wave of nausea. It was almost as if the house was rearranging itself, determined to trap me in its web of confusion. I stumbled backward, heart racing, and turned toward where I remembered the living room was, only to be met with an empty hallway. Just as panic gripped me, the walls seemed to echo a murmured laughter, swirling around me like wind caught in a vortex. I stumbled, clutching my head as waves of disorientation washed over me. I couldn't tell where I was anymore. Was the bathroom to my left or right? Had I lost my sense of direction entirely? Just as panic was about to take hold, I caught sight of a doorway I had never noticed before. It stood partially open, just enough for my curiosity to pull me in. The house felt alive, its atmosphere pressing around me like an embrace that was all wrong. The very foundation pulsed with energy, urging me to explore deeper, to discover the truth lurking in its shadows. When I finally gathered my wits, I stumbled toward the doorway, the curiosity battling against my fear. I had to see what lay inside. Was it escape? Was it an answer? As I took a step forward, I could feel the house watching, enjoying my confusion, weaving its nefarious intent into my very being. As the days turned into weeks, the feeling of losing time became more pronounced. I would wake up in the morning, and it felt like I had only just closed my eyes. The sun would rise and set almost as if it were on a loop, and I found myself glancing at the clock more often than I ever had before. Each time I checked, I was startled to discover that hours had slipped away without my notice. I began to notice strange gaps in my memory. One moment, I would be in the living room, sorting through boxes, and the next I would find myself standing in the hallway, staring at a wall, unsure of how I got there. It was as if the house was playing a game, hiding the moments from me, and I was merely a pawn in its elaborate scheme. My partner seemed to notice my growing confusion, but they brushed it off as stress from the move. "You're just adjusting," they would say with a reassuring smile, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One evening, I decided to take a break and sit in the garden to breathe in the fresh air. The flowers swayed gently, and the birds chirped sweetly, but even the beauty of nature couldn't lift the weight of dread I felt. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, hoping to collect my thoughts. When I opened them again, the sun was much lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. I was shocked to realize that I had been sitting there for hours, lost in thought. The whispers began soon after that. At first, they were faint, barely audible, like a breeze rustling through leaves. But as the days went on, they grew louder and more distinct. I would hear my name, soft and inviting, calling me from behind closed doors. "Come here, come play," the whispers would beckon, sending chills down my spine. I would stand frozen, staring at the door, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure whether to answer or run away. One night, I couldn't resist the urge to follow the whispers. They seemed to lead me down the dark hallway, where the air felt colder, almost electric. I hesitated at the door to what I thought was the laundry room, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The whispers grew more insistent, wrapping around me like a fog. I turned the knob slowly, and as the door creaked open, I was met with darkness. The room was empty, but the whispers faded into a soft giggle, echoing off the walls. I stumbled back, heart racing, realizing that the house was toying with me. I started to lose track of days completely. I would wake up, and it felt like I had just been asleep for a few minutes, yet the sun would be setting again. I tried to keep a journal to document everything, but the words would blur together as if the house was erasing my memories. I would write down what I thought were important events, but when I read them back, they felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. My sense of reality began to fray at the edges, and I started to question everything. My partner, my sanity, even the house itself. I felt like a ghost wandering through my own life, trapped in a loop of time that I couldn't escape. As I continued to navigate this strange existence, I began to notice something peculiar about the furniture. It was as if the chairs and tables were becoming sentient, developing personalities of their own. It started subtly. I would catch the dining chairs creaking softly, as if they were whispering secrets to one another when no one was around. I would often find myself staring at them, half expecting them to respond to my thoughts. One evening, as I sat on the couch, I noticed the lamp flickering in a peculiar rhythm. It was almost as if it were trying to communicate, sending me a message through its light. "Hello," it seemed to say with each flicker, and I couldn't help but feel a strange connection to it. I laughed nervously, brushing it off as my imagination running wild. But deep down, I felt an unsettling thrill. As the days passed, the furniture's behavior escalated. The armchair in the corner would shift slightly when I wasn't looking, as if it wanted to be closer to me. The coffee table seemed to rearrange itself, always positioning itself perfectly for my feet to rest on. I found myself talking to them, sharing my thoughts and fears, and in return, they offered a strange comfort. Yet, there was something sinister lurking beneath this newfound friendship. The more I engaged with the furniture, the more I felt their presence weighing down on me. The chairs, once inviting, now seemed to leer at me with an unsettling gaze. I could swear I saw the lamp's light dim when I expressed doubt or fear, as if it thrived on my unease. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard the unmistakable sound of furniture being moved around. It was a soft scraping like chairs sliding across the floor. I gathered my courage and crept out to see what was happening. As I peeked into the living room, I was met with a sight that sent chills down my spine. The chairs were arranged in a circle, and the lamp flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. The furniture seemed to be alive, holding a meeting of sorts, and I was the unwitting guest. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were discussing me, plotting something I couldn't understand. The laughter from the whispers echoed in my mind, and I realized that I was no longer just losing time. I was losing my grip on reality itself. The next day, I found myself drawn to the furniture again, despite the fear that gripped me. I wanted to understand what was happening, but with each passing moment, I felt the house tightening its grip on my mind. The furniture had become my friends, but they were also my captors, and I was trapped in a game I didn't know how to play. As the strange occurrences continued, my nights grew darker, plagued by nightmares that seemed to reach deep into my subconscious. I would drift off to sleep only to find myself trapped inside the house, its walls shifting and closing in around me like a predator preparing to consume its prey. Each dream was a relentless cycle of fear and confusion, the house looming over me with a life of its own, as if it delighted in my terror. In these nightmares, I wandered through the familiar rooms that had once offered comfort now twisted into labyrinths of dread. The furniture loomed larger, grinning mischievously as I stumbled through the hallways, desperately seeking an exit, but finding only more corridors filled with oppressive shadows. I could hear the whispers. My name echoed softly on the air, luring me deeper into the heart of the house, where I knew I could never escape. I would wake up gasping, my heart pounding in my chest, drenched in sweat. My eyes would fly open, and I would immediately grasp for the reality that was fading in the haze of sleep. But the moment I sat up in bed, I was filled with a deep sense of dread. The walls felt closer, as if they had shifted while I slept. I pressed my back against the headboard, my breath shallow, staring at the darkened corners that felt like they were inching toward me. Just a dream, I would whisper to myself, willing the fear to dissipate. Yet, each time I glanced over at my partner, they were sound asleep, unaware of the nightmare that consumed me night after night. I felt so isolated in my fear, a prisoner to the horrors lurking just beyond the consciousness of my slumbering partner. Their calmness contrasted sharply with my inner turmoil, and I hesitated to wake them, not wanting to instill my nightmares in their peaceful dreams. As the nights passed, I could feel my grasp on reality fraying more and more. Each nightmare bled into the next, a continuous loop of darkness that left me exhausted and drained. I could barely focus during the day. The daytime shadows felt tainted by the horrors of the night, and the vibrant colors of our home seemed muted, slipping deeper into shades of gray. I would spend moments lost in a haze, staring at the wallpaper and feeling as if it was crawling toward me, ready to engulf me once more. I began to dread the night, counting down the hours until I would have to close my eyes. My partner would suggest a movie or a game to break up the silence, but I could hardly engage, too preoccupied with the impending darkness. Would tonight be the night the house finally consumed me whole? I wondered if I could somehow communicate my terror without sounding irrational, without sounding like I had lost my mind. One seemingly ordinary evening, my partner and I were sitting in the living room, attempting to watch a movie to distract ourselves from the weight of our new life. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I could feel the shadows lurking at the corners of the room, waiting for the perfect moment to pull me back into my nightmares. As the flickering light of the screen danced across the walls, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look closely at the wallpaper, its patterns shifting and swirling in a way that felt wrong. My stomach dropped as I leaned closer, realizing that the walls themselves seemed to be alive. Faded outlines in the shapes of faces appeared and disappeared, their features twisted and contorted in expressions of sorrow and agony. I gasped, and my partner turned to me, brow furrowed in concern. "What's wrong?" they asked, eyes darting to the walls, trying to understand my sudden panic. "Look, the walls, do you see them?" I stammered, my voice trembling. But when my partner looked closely, all they saw was the familiar patterns of the wallpaper, just ordinary designs devoid of fear. I felt a wave of isolation wash over me again, my heart racing. "I swear, they're watching us," I insisted, motioning toward the walls filled with faces. But my partner dismissed it as fatigue. "It's just your imagination, love. You've been under so much stress. You need to relax." But I couldn't shake the feeling that they were wrong. I stood, my hands trembling, desperate to convince my partner to see it. The walls appeared to be alive, their faded outlines shifting as if they were crying, tears like shadows running down their surfaces as they wept for things I couldn't comprehend. Each face felt like it was pleading with me, as if they knew our every move, holding memories of other lives that had been swallowed by this house. A dark, endless cycle of despair echoing through the very foundation. I felt as though they were trying to communicate with me, warning me about something sinister. Days became blurred into a dizzying haze as I began to notice more and more faces in the walls, their sad, hollow eyes following my every step. It became impossible to ignore. At night, I could almost hear their whispers, soft and sorrow-laden, merging with the familiar calls of my name. They seemed to be urging me to uncover the truth, to understand the grasp the house held over us. As I navigated through life in the house, I became convinced that it knew me as much as I knew myself. Each creak of the floorboards felt like a heartbeat, each groan of the foundation a sigh of recognition. It felt like a sentient being, watching and waiting, hungry for something I couldn't name. With frustration simmering beneath the surface, I approached my partner one more time, begging them to believe me. "We have to investigate the house. There's something terribly wrong here," I pleaded, desperation clawing at my throat. But they just smiled kindly, patting my hand. "We can manage. Let's just enjoy our new home, all right?" They seemed to miss the weight of reality pressing down on us, as if the oppressiveness of the house was invisible to them. I felt the walls pressing in around me, craving solace in my own truth, while the house continued its haunting watch over us. The suffocating weight of my sleepless nights and the paranoid whispers of the house drove me to a breaking point. I could no longer pretend everything was fine, nor could I ignore the sinking feeling that I was losing my mind. The shadows in the corners of our home seemed to thicken. Every creak of the floorboards sent shivers of dread down my spine. I had to confront my partner about what was truly happening. One evening, I sat on the edge of our bed, heart racing as I rehearsed what I needed to say. My palms were clammy, and my mind spun with doubt. Could I really convey the horror I felt? Finally, when my partner walked in, merrily humming to themselves, I couldn't hold back any longer. "We need to talk," I blurted out, my voice trembling more than I intended. They looked at me, surprise flashing in their eyes. "I don't know how to explain this, but the house, it's alive." I hear whispers calling my name, and the furniture seems to watch us. The walls have faces, and they are crying. To my utter shock, my partner's expression shifted into an unsettling grin. Instead of concern, amusement danced in their features. "Oh, come on," they chuckled, brushing off my fears like pesky cobwebs. "You've been reading too many horror stories. It's all in your mind, dear." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. How could they dismiss my experiences so easily? I wanted to shake them awake, to make them see the dread that enveloped us. I opened my mouth to protest, but the laughter continued, light and airy, trailing off into an unsettling silence. It's just the stress of moving, your mind playing tricks on you, they continued, a twinkle in their eye as if enjoying a private joke. You've always had a wild imagination. Just try to relax and enjoy our new home. I felt a sinking sensation deep in my chest, a deep chasm opening up as their words echoed in my mind, laced with disbelief. Was it all in my mind? A part of me wanted to believe it, wanted so desperately to escape the horrors I had uncovered. But another part, the part that had been awake during those haunted nights, screamed in defiance. How could they not feel the malevolence lurking in the shadows? The dissonance tore at my sanity, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. I went to bed that night feeling as if the walls themselves had closed in on me, folding around me like a suffocating blanket. I turned to my restless partner, seeking reassurance, but they were sound asleep, an innocent smile on their face. It drove me to the edge. I longed to shake them awake, to pull them from their blissful ignorance, but the fear of their laughter drowned me in silence. Days turned into an endless cycle of confusion and despair. I felt a fraying rope tethering me to reality, each thread unraveling as I drifted further into madness. I spent hours wandering the labyrinthine halls of the house, my footsteps echoing eerily against bare walls, feeling as if I was being followed by an unseen presence, always just out of sight. The whispers had grown louder, swirling around me like a tempest, taunting, teasing, and relentless. As I walked the corridors, I felt the oppressive weight of the house closing in, suffocating me in its grasp. It was as if the walls had eyes, tracking me with grotesque delight at my unraveling sanity. I would press my palms against the surfaces, desperate to find a thin shred of reality to cling to. But the textures felt alive, pulsing under my touch as if the house were breathing, alive with dark intent, drawing me deeper into its heart. What if I really was going crazy? The thought haunted me, a dark specter lurking at the edge of my consciousness. I had long since stopped counting the days, the hours bleeding together in a haze of disorientation. The endless cycle of nightmares and waking terror left me feeling fragile, no longer able to distinguish between the waking world and the haunting dreams that plagued my nights. Faces would press against the windows, their mournful expressions beckoning me to join them in their sorrow. With each hollow laugh of the furniture, each shifting shadow that danced just out of reach, the truth I had avoided became undeniable. The house was not just a home, it was a monster. It had ensnared me in its web, feeding off my fears and searching for the final thread to draw me into its depths. I felt like a marionette, strings fraying, dancing to a tune I could not hear. Desperation surged within me as I raced through the endless halls, the walls closing in with each frantic step. "Is anyone there?" I shouted, my voice breaking into the silence. But only the echoes of my own despair replied. There was no escape, no respite from the madness that had gripped me. The house loomed larger, a behemoth of malevolence, as if it was tracking my every move, feeding off my unraveling threads of sanity. In the haze of my breakdown, I realized the profound isolation I had created. It felt as though I was at war with myself, fighting against the shadows that dressed in reality, blurring the line between madness and clarity. I had searched for answers in every crevice of this house, but all I had discovered was the consuming darkness, its tendrils wrapping tighter and tighter around me. I gazed into the abyss of the hall, my breath hitching as despair clawed at my throat. The monster of the house was winning. As I turned to run once more, I knew deep down that there was no escaping the truth. I was trapped in a nightmare with no waking, lost to the very thing that had once promised to be a home. As I turned to run once more, I knew deep down that there was no escaping the truth. I was trapped in a nightmare with no waking, lost to the very thing that had once promised to be a home. The shadows pressed around me, whispering my name in voices that felt both familiar and alien, like echoes of memories I couldn't quite grasp. My heart raced as I sprinted down the corridor, walls closing in with each step. Suddenly, the lights flickered, first a soft dimming, then a full blackout that plunged me into darkness. I stumbled, my hands shooting out to catch myself against the cool wall, feeling the rough texture beneath my fingertips. Panic gripped my throat, squeezing tighter as I listened to the sound of my own breathing in the suffocating silence. I could hear the faint creaking of floorboards, but this time it sounded like footsteps. Someone or something was behind me. I froze, my heart pounding like a drum against the familiar, hollow sounds of the house. The whispers intensified, now more urgent, swirling around me until they were a cacophony of sound. My name echoed through the darkness, a chilling reminder that I wasn't alone. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath as I strained to listen, my ears tuning into whatever might be lurking in the shadows. In a fit of desperation, I remembered the old bookshelf in the study. It had been a dusty relic, tilted slightly to the left, that seemed to call out to me. Perhaps knowledge could save me. I dashed through the pitch-black hallway, propelled by fear and a flicker of hope. When I pushed through the threshold of the study, I felt a strange warmth touch my skin, a deceptive comfort that made me feel both safe and exposed. But as I reached for the shelf, something icy brushed against my arm. I recoiled, my heart racing anew. I turned, feeling a cold breath wash over me, sending shivers down my spine. The only light came from the moon outside, spilling through the window and casting long, twisted shadows across the floor. I could barely make out the outline of every book, each one a potential vessel of secrets, curses, and histories forgotten. With trembling hands, I gripped the nearest book, its leather cover cracked and dusty. I opened it, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain what was happening. But instead, I found it filled with sketches, nightmarish figures of grotesque faces and twisted bodies that seemed to bleed off the pages. I felt a wave of nausea, an overwhelming urge to close the book and look away, but I couldn't. The figures were alive with menace, their eyes following me, reaching out in silent screams that resonated with the whispers surrounding me. Suddenly, the shadows in the corners thickened, swirling together as if breathing, forming into a shape that felt all too familiar. It was the outline of a figure that resembled my partner, yet every detail was wrong. The limbs too long, the face devoid of expression, eyes hollow like two voids. "Help me," it whispered, but the voice was distorted, echoes of the house weaving through its syllables. I staggered backward, panic clawing at my throat once again. Racing out of the study, I slammed the door behind me. I could hear the figure, my partner, calling to me again, footsteps echoing behind me as I dashed down another unfamiliar path. The hallways stretched and twisted, like a maze reshaping itself, leading me away from the light, deeper into the heart of the house. Each turn felt like another trap closing in around me. Then, through the flickering light of a single bulb overhead, I noticed doors that had never been there before, old, rotting wood with rusted doorknobs. I hesitated, torn between fear and the instinct to discover what lay beyond them. The whispers turned sharper, almost impatient, clawing at my mind. The house wanted me to open one. I reached toward the nearest door, heart thundering in my chest. Just as my fingers brushed the doorknob, a fevered gust of wind burst from the room beyond, as if the house itself was exhaling a sigh, desperate to expel something trapped inside. I twisted the knob and flung the door open. Inside, the space was dark, but I could see shapes moving quickly, like shadows darting away from the light. They avoided the moonlight, flitting around like frightened animals. I stepped inside, compelled by a force I couldn't understand. The air reeked of decay, heavy and suffocating. I shivered as a chill ran through me, and the door slammed shut behind me. In the dimness of the room, I began to see objects, old toys, a rocking chair that creaked eerily without anyone in it, and mirrors covered in dust. I approached one, my reflection hazy in the dim light. But as I leaned closer, I gasped. This reflection wasn't just mine. It was the faces from the sketches, contorted and distorted, grinning unnaturally back at me. I recoiled, but the mirror pulled at me like a magnet, the faces swirling, reaching out through the glass, beckoning me to join them. Panic surged within me, and I turned to run, but the shadows converged in front of me, hungrily clawing at the air, blocking any escape. I found myself backed against the corner, gasping for breath, overwhelmed by a sense of profound dread. The laughter began again, low and teasing, echoing off the walls as if the very house was mocking my fear, as if it thrived on my despair. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the room, rattling my bones. The bookshelf tilted dangerously to one side, books flying like bats from their perches to scatter around me, creating a chaotic storm of forgotten stories and lost memories. I stumbled, trying to shield myself from the chaos, but the shadows grew thicker, crawling toward me with an insatiable hunger. As the last of the light flickered out, I felt a cold, creeping tendril curl around my ankle. I screamed, a sound swallowed by the darkness as I was pulled down into the abyss that had become my reality. As the last of the light flickered out, I felt a cold, creeping tendril curl around my ankle. I screamed, a sound swallowed by the darkness as I was pulled down into the abyss that had become my reality. It felt surreal, like being ensnared by shadows that danced with glee, as if each whisper was a part of the house, relishing my terror. The cold grabbed hold of my leg, and I fought against it, kicking and thrashing, but it was too strong. In panic, I glanced around the dark room, desperate to find something, anything, to help me escape. The faces in the mirrors grinned wider, their laughter echoing around me like a chorus of malevolence. They reached out with ghostly fingers, hoping to coerce me to join their ranks. I could almost hear their pleas, mingling with the whispers of the house, urging me to surrender. Suddenly, the rocking chair began to sway back and forth, creaking louder as if something were settling into place. I froze, eyes wide, as I imagined a presence forming right before me. The chair rocked with a ghostly rhythm, slow at first, then growing quicker, picking up speed. It was relentless, almost angry, and as it moved, shadows danced across the walls, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes. I could hear the whispers grow more frantic, a deafening urgency that pressed into my ears like a cacophony of lost souls. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something shift in the darkness behind the chair. My heart raced as I turned to look, dread washing over me. There was a figure emerging, wrapped in shadows that clung to it like a cloak. I couldn't discern its features, but it was tall and seemed to stretch unnaturally. A voice resonated from it, soft at first, then rising, filled with an echoing torment. "You've come to play, haven't you?" The air turned thick and suffocating, making it hard to breathe. "No, please, you don't understand," I shouted, my voice trembling as desperation clawed at me. Slowly, the figure stepped closer, revealing something horrific. A face twisted in eternal anguish, eyes hollow, mouth stretched into a perpetual scream that looked all too familiar. Images flickered in my mind. My partner. Was this what they had become? Without a second thought, I lunged toward the door, hoping against hope to escape this nightmarish encounter. The shadow figure let out a low, chilling laugh that echoed in my mind, a sound so unsettling. It felt as if it was pulling me into a void. My hands fumbled for the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. I twisted it desperately, but it wouldn't budge, as if the house had sealed me in. Gritting my teeth, I threw my shoulder against the door, feeling the solid weight holding me in place. Then came a series of violent rapping noises, pounding that shook the very foundation of the house. The shadows swirled faster, and I felt the walls closing in on me. With each desperate push against the door, I felt my strength wavering, but I refused to give in. The whispers were more insistent now, weaving into my thoughts, taunting me, as if the house itself craved my surrender. In a last surge of panic, I grabbed a nearby book, flinging it against the door. It struck with a thud, and the impact sent a ripple through the air. To my astonishment, the door cracked open just a fraction, revealing a sliver of light, the promise of escape. I pushed harder, fueled by a rush of adrenaline, and the door swung wide. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath, but the shadows followed, swirling and blissfully angry, reaching for me like fingers of darkness. The once familiar corridor now swelled around me, seeming to stretch on forever, twisting with the very essence of my fear. I sprinted forward, not daring to look back, not daring to hear the echo of that haunting laugh again. As I sprinted, I glanced into each room I passed. Some doors were cracked open, revealing glimpses of horrifying scenes. A child's laughter morphing into cries echoing from old toys. A woman in a long dress brushing her hair in front of a broken mirror, her reflection still smiling as she stared blankly ahead. I wanted to scream at them to run, to help me, but I could barely keep my own fears at bay. Every time I passed a door, I felt the urge to flee grow stronger. It was then that I stumbled into the kitchen. The atmosphere changed completely. It was chilling yet oddly familiar, like a long-lost memory of comfort twisted into horror. On the counter, a knife lay glimmering in the sparse light, the blade reflecting the shadows that seemed to dance in derision. It beckoned to me an invitation to take control. Or was it something worse, a sinister trap laid by the house itself? My heart raced as I stared at it, torn between instincts. I could feel the shadows creeping closer at the threshold, whispering my name with an eagerness that sent more chills down my spine. Take it, they hissed. In an instant, I made my decision. I lunged forward, grasping the knife tightly in my hand. The cold metal connected with my skin, sending a jolt of determination through me. As I turned to face the doorway again, a sudden flash of movement caught my eye. The shadow figure dashed into the room as if propelled by the darkness itself, lunging toward me in a wild rage. Instinct kicked in, and I brought the knife up, ready to defend myself. The figure stopped, a moment of hesitation flashing across its twisted features before it morphed into a whirl of shadows, flickering in and out of reality. It was taunting me, testing my resolve, but I felt a strange power surging within me. "I won't let you take me," I shouted, feeling my voice solidify in the air like reinforced steel. The air thickened around me, the shadows retreating slightly as fear danced in their unseen eyes. I took a step forward, emboldened by the thought of reclaiming my life from the monstrous grip of this place. Yet, as I stood my ground, the laughter grew louder, rising to a deafening crescendo. The figures in the mirrors began to scream, their sounds blending into the laughter until it felt like it was consuming me, a swirling tempest of sound and fury. Sweat dripped down my forehead as I steadied myself, gripping the knife tighter. "Bring it on!" I shouted defiantly, my voice ringing through the chaotic noise. This was my moment to fight back, to uncover the secrets this house had hidden away for too long. I would not succumb to its darkness. But just as I prepared for the next surge, a deafening silence fell over the kitchen, plunging everything into a tense stillness. My breath hitched as I turned slowly, the shadows pulling back, waiting. In that frozen moment, I realized that the house was not just playing with me. It was preparing for something far worse. In a desperate attempt to reclaim my sanity, I faced the house head-on. The atmosphere was thick with malice, and every corner of the room felt alive, festering with the darkness that had enclosed me for so long. I took a deep breath, my heart racing wildly against my ribcage. I needed to confront the entity that had taken root in every memory, every echo of this place. It was time to demand answers. I shouted into the shadows, my voice tinged with fury and fear. "Why are you tormenting us? What do you want from me?" The walls trembled, vibrating under the weight of my words. A chilling silence followed, wrapping around me like a spider's web, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. Then, a deep voice rumbled from the very core of the house, reverberating through the floors and walls. "You are part of it now," it boomed, each word a heavy blow that settled deep into my bones. The spectral essence of the house seemed to pulse with life, the shadows shifting menacingly as if responding to the command of this unseen presence. The room around me sank into chaos, the furniture trembling violently, and the floorboards groaning under an unseen pressure. I staggered back, fear clawing in my throat, but I refused to let it overpower me. "No, I am not yours," I yelled, my voice breaking through the cacophony rising around me. The shadows writhed, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock me, leaning in close as if awaiting my downfall. "You entered willingly," the voice continued, rising and falling like a sinister wind. "You fed the darkness with your doubts, your fears. This house is a reflection of your spirit, and now it is bound to you." I clenched the knife tightly, feeling its cold metal against my skin. My grip was the only solid thing in a world spiraling into madness. "I won't let you take me," I shouted, summoning every ounce of strength and defiance. "This is not my home anymore. I am more than your prison." With each declaration, the shadows flared, thrashing violently as if recoiling from my words. The atmosphere crackled with tension, electricity jolting in the air as light flickered in and out. I felt an odd thrill build within me, the boundaries between me and the darkness beginning to blur. It was both frightening and empowering, the realization that I could either be consumed or rise above it. The voice deepened, dripping with malice. "You think you can escape? The house has claimed many souls, those who wandered too close, those who lost their way. You are merely another addition to its collection." Suddenly, a series of spectral images flickered before me, faces of those who had been trapped before. Their expressions were twisted in despair, mouths opening in silent screams as they reached out, desperate for escape. I recognized some of them from glimpses I'd seen earlier, loved ones who had fallen prey to this realm of darkness. I could almost hear their cries, merging with the sinister voice to create a haunting symphony of anguish. Panic surged through me, but I fought it down. "No more!" I shouted, stepping forward, knife raised defiantly against the oppressive force surrounding me. "I won't let this place take any more from me." As I took another step, the energy shifted. The shadows roared in anger, the whispers escalating into a fevered pitch, drowning out my own thoughts. I could feel the house vibrating beneath my feet, a massive, living entity enraged by my defiance. The windows rattled violently, and the air grew thick with darkness as it began to swirl almost into a physical form, writhing and coiling, trying to ensnare me in its grasp. In that moment of chaos, clarity struck me like a lightning bolt. This house thrived on pain, feeding off the very essence of my fears. It wanted me to surrender, to yield to despair. I needed to turn the tide. "I see you for what you are," I roared, grounding myself against the turbulence. "You are nothing but an illusion. I am stronger than your darkness." The shadows recoiled, the faces in the mirrors wavering as if caught in a storm. For a moment, the grip on reality faltered, and I felt the pressure loosening just a bit. Boldly, I plunged forward, knife pointed to the heart of the festering darkness that surrounded me. I refused to be a victim. I am taking back my mind. With a surge of energy, I thrust the knife into the air, channeling my fear, anger, and loss into that single act. The blade glinted in the faint light as I imagined it slicing through the web of darkness, severing the connection binding me to the malevolence of the house. A blinding light erupted from the point of impact, bright and pure, chasing away the shadows like the dawn dispelling night. The voice howled in rage, the walls quaking as the power of the light surged forward. "No, you cannot escape this," it roared, but I pushed harder, feeling the warmth enveloping me as cracks began to spiderweb across the walls, light spilling through the fractures like a flood. The ground shook violently, dishes rattled, and the very foundation of the house groaned in protest. I could feel myself being pulled between two worlds, the darkness that sought to drag me back and the light that beckoned me toward freedom. Every ounce of pain, every sleepless night spent in the grip of anxiety, fueled my resolve. I wouldn't let the house claim me. I could feel it starting to falter, the shadows pulling back, swirling chaotically, trying to hold their ground. The light intensified, casting everything into stark relief, illuminating the corners of the horror that had once terrified me. "I am free!" I screamed, my voice rising above the tumult, echoing with newfound strength. The very air vibrated with the assertion of my will, the darkness shuddering in acknowledgement of my power. I thrust the knife forward once more, channeling every last ounce of my strength into that single, unified purpose. A blinding flash enveloped everything, the darkness shrieking in defeat as reality began to tear apart. Cracks spread wide across the walls, swallowing the shadows whole as they screeched in agony. The screams behind me melted into a chorus of cries that slowly faded, the faces now at peace as light consumed the darkness. As I stood in that radiant glow, I felt the weight of the house's terror crumbling, piece by piece, until all that remained was warmth, a gentle embrace that welcomed me to the realm I had long forgotten. I had done it. I had reclaimed my sanity. I had broken free from the grasp of the house. And as I turned to face the brightness, I knew that I was not just escaping. I was starting anew. With each step forward, I felt lighter, as if the chains that bound my spirit had shattered, returning me to the world where hope and love existed once more. Suddenly, I found myself back in bed. Was I dreaming? The familiar surroundings of my room surrounded me, the comfort of my sheets hugging me gently. It felt like life had returned to normal, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed forever. I blinked a few times, allowing the mundane sights of my room to sink in. The soft glow of the bedside lamp, the faint hum of the radiator, and the comforting scent of lavender from a nearby candle. But beneath the surface, a disquieting sensation gnawed at me. The stillness felt too perfect, too calm. As I lay there, I couldn't deny the remnants of fear still echoing in my chest, the memory of screaming shadows and tormenting whispers lurking just beyond my consciousness. Had I really defeated that darkness? Or was it merely hiding, biding its time before it came creeping back? I pushed myself up, the bed creaking softly beneath me, and surveyed my surroundings. Everything seemed untouched, as if the hours, or maybe even days, had simply dissolved into thin air. I glanced at the clock. The familiar numbers stared back at me, tauntingly frozen at 3:13 a.m. Time had reduced to a mere illusion, and I blinked against the realization that I had no clear idea of what had just transpired. Shaking my head, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the cold wooden floor grounding me back to reality. I took a deep breath, inhaling the comforting sense of home, yet the air still felt charged, as if the remnants of the encounter lingered just outside my door. I rose, my heart rate quickening slightly as I made my way toward the bathroom. The routine motions of splashing water on my face should have calmed me down, but the reflections in the mirror unsettled me further. My eyes bore into my own, searching for traces of the light and darkness entwined within me. The dark circles beneath my eyes spoke of sleepless nights, of battles fought within the depths of an oppressive nightmare. I looked closely, and for a brief moment, I swore I saw a flicker of shadow twisting behind me in the mirror, a brief constellation of memories from my ordeal. I whipped around, heart racing, but nothing was there. Only an echoing silence welcomed me back. What was the price of my escape? Dread gnawed at my insides, reminding me that trauma has a way of stitching itself into the fiber of our beings. I couldn't help but consider the price of survival, the heavy weight of my experience. It dawned on me that even if I had emerged victorious, a piece of that darkness had threaded itself into my soul, and perhaps it was inseparable from my very essence now. As I stepped into the hallway, the house felt eerily quiet, as if holding its breath in anticipation. I walked slowly, the shadows dancing just out of reach, reminding me that I had once fought a great battle here. The corners felt alive, as if they remembered the horrors that unfolded within their walls. I tried to shake the paranoia off, rationalizing that I was simply imagining things, yet something deep inside couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to keep my guard up. I made my way to the kitchen, the soft glow of the morning light trickling through the window with a deceptive sense of comfort. I poured myself a glass of water, watching as the liquid swirled inside the glass like memories that had once held me captive. But even as I drank, my thoughts returned to the house, the shifting shadows, the taunting laughter. I shuddered slightly, wondering if I would ever truly be free of the shadows that still lingered in the corners of my mind. Maybe it was the unease that hung in the air, or perhaps it was the silence that now felt too heavy. It was then that I noticed something strange on the table, a small, tattered envelope clearly out of place. As I approached, I felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding wash over me. The envelope wasn't familiar, yet it seemed to beckon me to open it. With trembling fingers, I reached for it, hesitating for just a moment. Hadn't I fought hard enough? Curiosity lured me in like a moth to a flame, and I couldn't resist. Carefully, I slid a finger beneath the flap and opened it. Inside lay a single piece of paper, not blank, but scrawled with frantic handwriting that seemed to pulse with urgency. You think you've escaped, but the house is always watching. You're not alone. The words felt like ice water coursing through my veins. I knew this house, its oppressive energy, its lurking shadows were deeply woven into the fabric of my life. What did this mean? Before I could contemplate any further, a strange noise echoed from the depths of the house, a soft, rhythmic tapping that began to grow louder, resonating through the walls, the floors, and the air. Terrified, I dropped the note, the paper fluttering to the ground like a fallen leaf. With my heart pounding, every instinct screamed at me to run, to escape this place. But where could I actually go? I couldn't outrun the shadows of the past. They had found a way to come back, to envelope me in a shroud of dread once more. I turned slowly, every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet amplifying the tension. My breath caught in my throat as I walked toward the source of the noise. The walls loomed around me, tauntingly silent for just a moment, then pulsing with an energy that felt almost alive. I could hear the tapping from behind the door at the end of the hallway, soft, insistent, and oddly familiar, like a long-lost friend calling me home. With a mix of dread and morbid curiosity, I slowly approached. The moment my fingers brushed the cool handle of the door, I hesitated. What lay behind it? Another nightmare? Or perhaps a chance to truly understand what the house had become? A reflection of my own fear and strength combined? My heart raced as I thought of possibility intertwining with uncertainty. With a deep breath, I turned the handle and stepped inside. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room bathed in a strange, flickering glow. Shadows danced along the walls, their movements erratic and unsettling. The tapping had stopped the moment I entered, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the source of the sound, but all I saw was a large, antique mirror standing in the center, its ornate frame tarnished. With age, the mirror seemed out of place, as though it didn't belong in this world. The glass shimmered faintly, not reflecting the room, but something else entirely, a swirling void of light and darkness. I felt a pull, an almost magnetic force drawing me closer, and despite every instinct screaming at me to turn back, I took a step forward. As I approached, the air grew colder, and the faint hum of energy buzzed in my ears. I stopped just short of the mirror, my reflection barely visible against the chaotic backdrop within it. Then, without warning, the tapping resumed, this time from inside the glass. I froze, my breath hitching. The sound was louder now, more insistent. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm, almost like a code. My hand trembled as I reached out toward the mirror, fingers hovering just inches from its surface. The tapping stopped again, and for a moment, everything was still. Then the glass rippled, It wasn't like a crack or shatter. It moved like water disturbed by a single drop. My reflection vanished completely, replaced by a figure cloaked in shadow. Its form was indistinct, shifting and amorphous, but its eyes were piercing. They glowed with an intensity that pinned me in place, a mixture of curiosity and malice burning within them. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The figure didn't respond with words. Instead, it raised a hand, if it could be called that, and pressed it against the inside of the glass. The surface rippled again, and I felt a strange warmth on my own palm, as though it were inviting me to do the same. Every rational thought begged me to run, to leave this cursed house and never look back. But something deeper, something primal, compelled me to stay. Slowly, I raised my hand and pressed it against the mirror. The moment our hands met, a surge of energy shot through me. My vision blurred, and the room spun violently around me. I felt weightless and heavy all at once, as though I were being pulled in every direction. When the chaos subsided, I found myself standing in a place that was both familiar and alien. It was the same room, or at least it seemed to be, but everything was inverted. The walls were darker, almost blackened, and the air was thick with an oppressive stillness. The shadows that had once danced along the walls now seemed alive, writhing and twisting like living things. And then I saw it, the figure from the mirror. It stood before me now, no longer confined to the glass. Its form was still shrouded in shadow, but it was more solid, more real. Its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, it spoke. "You've come," it said, its voice echoing as though it came from everywhere at once. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You are where you've always been," it replied cryptically. "This is your reflection." "My reflection?" I repeated, confused. "This house," it continued, gesturing around us with a sweeping motion. "It is not just wood and stone. It is you, your fears, your memories, your choices. Everything you've buried deep within yourself." I shook my head, trying to make sense of its words. "I don't understand." "You will," it said simply. "But first, you must face what lies ahead." Before I could ask what it meant, the shadows around us began to shift again. They coalesced into shapes, figures from my past. Faces I recognized but hadn't seen in years. Some were loved ones I had lost. Others were people I had hurt or who had hurt me. They stared at me with expressions that ranged from sorrow to anger to disappointment. "What is this?" I demanded, turning back to the figure. "This is your trial," it said. "To leave this place, to truly understand yourself. You must confront what you fear most." The figures began to close in around me, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of accusations and regrets. My chest tightened as panic set in. I wanted to run, to escape their judgmental gazes and haunting words. But there was nowhere to go. "Stop!" I shouted, covering my ears. The figure's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Face them." I hesitated but knew deep down that there was no other way out. Taking a deep breath, I turned to the nearest figure, a woman whose face was etched with pain. "I'm sorry," I said softly, tears welling in my eyes. "I never meant to hurt you." Her expression softened slightly before she dissolved into wisps of shadow. One by one, I faced each figure, acknowledging their pain and my own part in it. With every confrontation, the weight on my chest grew lighter. When the last figure vanished, I turned back to the shadowy being. Its form had changed. It was smaller now, less imposing. "You have begun to understand," it said. "What happens now?" I asked. "That is up to you," it replied. "The door is open." I looked around and saw a new door where none had been before. Without hesitation this time, I walked toward it and stepped through. I found myself back in the hallway of the house. My house, but something was different. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive energy was gone. The house no longer loomed around me. Instead, it felt welcoming. As I turned to look back at the door I had just exited, it was gone, replaced by an ordinary wall. Whatever had happened in that room, whatever trial I had faced, it was over now. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. I took a deep breath, letting the fresh, invigorating air fill my lungs. The familiar surroundings of my home now felt like a warm embrace rather than a prison. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting playful patterns on the floor, and I marveled at how vibrant the colors seemed. Everything was alive again. Curiosity bubbled within me. I wandered down the hallway, pausing to admire the photographs lining the walls. Each frame told a story, memories of laughter and love that had once filled this space. It was as if the house itself had been waiting for me to return, to rediscover the joy that had been overshadowed by darkness. I made my way to the living room, where the fireplace crackled softly, its warmth inviting. The furniture, once covered in dust, now looked polished and inviting. I sank into the plush couch, feeling the soft fabric against my skin. It was a moment of peace, a stark contrast to the turmoil I had faced before. As I sat there, I realized that this was not just a return. It was a new beginning. The trials I had faced in that mysterious room had changed me, stripped away the layers of fear and doubt. I felt stronger, more resilient. No longer would I allow the shadows of my past to dictate my future. Just then, a gentle knock echoed through the house. I stood up, heart racing, and approached the door. Who could it be? I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with possibilities. But this time, I was ready. I opened the door to find a familiar face, someone I had thought I'd lost forever. "Hey, I've been looking for you," they said, a smile breaking across their face. In that moment, I knew that whatever lay ahead, I was no longer alone. Together, we could face whatever challenges came our way. The house, once a symbol of confinement, had transformed into a sanctuary of hope and possibility. With a renewed sense of purpose, I stepped into the light, ready to embrace whatever came next.